Kids are out there using these devices, using phones, using iPads. What are they doing? Is it okay? Is it safe? Who knows? But we have a lot of smart people here who are going to help us figure it out. So for the latest in keeping our reputations pristine, at least online, and trying to safeguard our policy and our privacy, Larry Magid, technology columnist of Larry's World, is going to moderate our panel and help us figure out how to keep everybody safe.
Okay. All right, can I ask anybody who's not part of the panel to take your conversations outside, because it's really hard for the panelists to focus. Thank you very much. I'm Larry Magid. I do have a website called Larry's World. I'm also co-director of connectsafely.org and founder of safekids.com. And I'm also with the other radio network. We have Andrea from ABC News. I'm also the technology analyst with CBS News. And the reason that's relevant is that I have a live segment to do at 3:51. So when you see me dart out the door at exactly 3:46, it's not because I'm bored. It's because I'm on live radio. And then I will come back, if we're still here, at 3:54 and 20 seconds. It's very, very well timed. So I apologize for that. But I'm honored to moderate this panel with some great speakers, and a topic that's near and dear to my heart, having been involved with Internet safety since 1993, when I wrote Child Safety on the Information Highway for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I'm still living it down, because the document I wrote 17 years ago is still the basis for much of the discussion about online safety, which is really too bad, because the world has changed dramatically since I wrote that document in 1993. We are no longer focused just on pornography and predators. In fact, we are focused much more on kids' reputations, how they interact with each other, the drama of being a child and being a teen, some of the things kids do to get themselves in trouble, although those are often exaggerated as well. For example, a recent study found that only about 1% of kids have ever sent sexually explicit images of themselves, and all of the new research is showing that cyberbullying is nowhere near at epidemic proportions, as many people, including some in industry who have products to prevent cyberbullying, are trying to tell us. I am a big fan of having the option of using child protection products like the ones that are going to be presented on this panel. But I'm a bigger fan of enhancing the computer that kids carry around with them between their ears. And so one of the challenges I'm going to make to every member of this panel is to help us understand not just what your technology does and how great it is and how it works, but when it's necessary, when it's not necessary, how to introduce it to your children, whether to disclose it to your children, which I'm a strong believer, I'll give you my bias, and when to wean your children off of it. Because here's the dirty little secret. We had the dirty little secret about mommy bloggies. Here's the dirty little secret about parental controls. If all goes well, and in about 99.99% of the cases this happens, your child will turn 18. And I'm pretty sure that Net Nanny is not recommended for college dorm rooms. And so what we have to do is make sure that our children learn their own self-control, their own discipline, their own critical thinking skills. So not only are they safe on the internet, because trust me, that's the least of your problems. When they go out on dates, when they get in cars, when they're offered drugs, when they're offered alcohol, when they have to decide on whether or not to get involved sexually and how to get involved sexually, when they get their first credit card, when they get in that voting booth, they can do a lot more damage than they can on Facebook. Trust me. I know, because I raised 2 teenagers. So with that in mind, I'd like to open up the discussion about parental controls, reputation management, and I hope I haven't talked you all out of even considering these products, because I do believe that there is a role for this technology. I just think we need to use it thoughtfully. So our first speaker is, and I apologize, and I'm going to ask you to keep your comments maybe to 2 or 3 minutes. We will have some discussion. I will dart out the door. Andrea from ABC News will fill in for CBS News. See, we live in a cooperative, competitive world. and we will go on from there. So why don't we start, and I'm just going to go right in the order here. Russ is not speaking from, let's see here, I should know this, and I'm already losing my note. Clayton Ostler of NetNanny, Senior Director of Technology. Clayton, take it away for a few minutes.
Thanks, Larry. My name is Clayton Ostler. I'm the Senior Director of Technology for ContentWatch. That's the owner of the product NetNanny. NetNanny's been around for about 15 years. We are a parental control and a content filtering product. We've gone through several migrations to become a more robust product and to cover the way that things are changing. As Larry mentioned, the needs of parental controls and the things that we need to cover and monitor are changing all the time. The reason that we're here at CES is we're launching our new product for Android and iOS. Obviously, there's a big need for that in the mobile world. You know, one of the things that Larry mentioned when he was doing his introduction is that parental controls and the needs for protection for our kids have really changed. In you know, the early 90s, late 90s, it was all about just blocking pornography, and those threats have changed all the time. And it's an evolving process. It's something that we'll continually have to stay on top of, and the tools that we need are going to be continually changing as well, and I look forward to talking about that in this panel.
All right, thank you very much. How about, let's hear from George Garrick from SocialShield, CEO of SocialShield. George?
Okay, thanks, Larry. We have no slides?
No, you do. You can run it on your phone, actually.
Okay.
You have NetNanny on your phone to make sure the slides are appropriate for this audience?
I actually do. Okay, well, oh, there we go. I have no idea what's going to come up next.
Is this your,
okay.
These are your slides on this one?
I think it's what? Okay. Okay, I really, I think, only have 3 slides. Basically, the whole way that people are using the internet has changed. It used to be 5 years ago, you would never put private, personal information online. That was the thing that you taught your kids and that you never did. And the whole paradigm has changed with Facebook. And now it's all about personal and private information. Networks like Facebook are not really useful unless you're using your real name, real information. Same with other social networks. So the whole paradigm has changed to now where people are putting all sorts of private and personal information online. And kids especially don't really know how to draw the line sometimes. And the amount of information that gets posted is excessive and potentially too revealing relative to what the parents might want to see. And once it's out there, it's there for good. You can't retract it. You know, just ask Paris Hilton and some of the other celebrities. The second thing that's happened is it used to be that you would access the internet from a single device, and now you can access a social network from any device, anywhere, as well as mobile devices. So you have multiple access. So putting a protective piece of software on a single device doesn't really solve the problem because there are so many ways to access the network. And finally, the other thing is that most kids, or at least a lot of kids, teenagers, are spending more time on social networks than they're spending in the physical world. You've got a kid that maybe spends an hour a day unsupervised with people in the real world, but they're spending 3 hours when they go in their room at night and shut the door. And you have no idea who they're talking to, what people are trying to contact them, what kinds of photos are being posted. And the other thing is that there are typically a couple hundred friends that your kid has, and you need to not only watch what your kid is doing, but you need to watch what the other 200 kids are doing and saying, and what pictures they're posting about your kid. Because somebody can snap a photo with a cell phone at a party and put up a picture of your kid in a compromising situation, and you may not know that, or in fact, you will not know that, your kid may not know that, and that picture is there for good. And as colleges and employers start to look at what's online, there's a huge threat to reputational management.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to hear from Doug Parks for Microsoft Xbox.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay on this? Yeah? All right. No?
No, why don't you, could you swap mics with your neighbor there?
Hello?
There you go.
Is that better? All right. So I'm Director of Online Safety for IEB, or the Interactive Entertainment Business, and that covers Xbox and Xbox Live. And my focus, thanks, we got a fan. My focus is on safety around families and kids on our service. And so I've been doing that for a little over a year, but I've been in Xbox for 9 years, and I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly when it comes to what the capabilities are of the users on our service. So we focus a great deal on 3 primary areas. The first is safety and privacy by design. So our safety team is actually in the engineering organization, and we're involved in all product decisions and service decisions from ideation through end of life of those products. So we get to ensure that there's safety being considered in every stage of the development process for everything that launches, and we review those as well. The second is around content. So we're constantly expanding the amount of content and the types of content that are available on our system. This fall we launched a suite of applications that allow access to content such as movies, music, easily searchable via Bing, using Connect Voice, and that of course can introduce interesting challenges, because while your 2-year-old might not be able to type out the words that they want to search for, they can definitely say Xbox, Bing, princesses, and if those search results aren't right, then we're going to hear about it, right? So Microsoft took a very, very close approach to parental controls, and we actually built in the ability to manage the types of content that come back in those Bing search results on Xbox at a platform level, and it integrates into every single media application on the console. So if I say that I don't want rated R movies without a pin, every single application will adhere to those settings within the Xbox environment, which is pretty unique to this part of the world. The third area that we heavily focus on, and falls in line with what Larry was asking us to think about, was around education. And we have a website called Get Game Smart that we have for parents and children to learn about parental controls, safety, privacy, and the different ways that they can have fun while gaming and enjoying media, but in a safe and private way. We also have on that site what's called Pact. Pact is a conversation starter for parents and children to talk about what their habits might be while they're using media and entertainment and the internet. And it's really back to not just putting solid controls in place, because we think we have those, but actually allowing the parents and the children to talk about what those controls are, why they're in place, and when they might be able to see some leniency around some of those controls. So those are the 3 primary areas. I'm very excited to be here on this panel amongst great company and with Larry, and look forward to further discussions today.
All right, thank you very much. I will probably be walking out on, in Noopor, am I pronouncing that right? I will probably be walking out on Noopor's talk to go do my radio interview. Please don't be offended. Andrea will take my place, and I'll come back as soon as I'm off the air. But thank you so much. Okay. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm Noopor Argawal, Senior Director of Public Affairs for MTV. Our department is tasked with developing social issue campaigns that educate and empower our audience on some of the most important issues impacting their generation. In 2009, we launched A Thin Line, a campaign on digital abuse. And I'll just walk you through that real quick. So the way we define digital abuse, using a cell phone or a computer to spread lies, hurt or tease, invade somebody's privacy, basically any way somebody could use a device to make another kid's life miserable. We embarked on some research at the outset of the campaign and also did a follow-up study this past fall, which really revealed that digital abuse was pervasive among our audience, with more than half being affected by it. And I won't run through all the stats now because I know we're short on time, but you can see the different facets of the issue and how serious it can really be. And seeing this data and really understanding that, our audience is one of the first to grow up fully connected 24/7 dealing with digital abuse, we wanted to partner with them and give them tools and information to help them navigate this world that they were experiencing. Some of our main objectives are, one, just to connect the audience to the existing resources there are for help, such as the National Teen Dating Abuse Helpline or the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So we have a robust set of resources on athinline.org. We also try and spark a dialogue around the issue and get teens talking about what they're experiencing, because sometimes they don't feel like they can turn to their parents because they won't understand and they might make it worse. So we try and create safe forums for them to talk to each other and help collectively define their own line between what's innocent and what's inappropriate online. We have a digital app called Over the Line, which is on Facebook and the iPhone, which allows them to, in a pre-moderated setting, talk about those issues. We also try and do a little bit of movement building. So last October, we launched the Digital Rights Project, which is basically a set of rights that the audience themselves created for how they want to live online. So for example, they came up with the right, I have the right to live online without pressure or abuse, or I have the right to step in if I see somebody getting harassed online. And we wanted to really frame it in their voice and in a way that was not about do's and don'ts, but about what do you feel entitled to do online. We also try and help them show their support offline. So we launched consumer products in partnership with Pete Wentz, one of the popular artists for our audience from Fall Out Boy, and another up-and-coming designer. And that's something the audience can wear and therefore spark a dialogue about the issue when they're in school or offline. And then we've also tried to give them tools that'll help them normalize healthy behavior. So we launched an app called Draw Your Line, which was actually crowdsourced from a young member of our audience, which allows people to upload the positive action they're taking to stop digital abuse, and it gets posted to this map, which you'll see at the top of this slide here. And the idea is to counter this message we kept hearing in our research where kids were saying, well, everybody else is bullying, so what's the big deal if I pile onto the Facebook wall? We wanted to flip that and say, actually, there's tens of thousands of kids who are taking positive action, so you're not alone if that's the route you want to go in. And all of this is also packaged for parents. So we have a subset of our site called grownups.athinline.org, which gives parents some tools on how they can use these resources to have those conversations with their kids, and hopefully, do so in an effective manner. And in general, we just encourage, the parents of our viewers to, not, threaten to take away devices, because that's often the reason kids don't go to parents in the first place, and to just be there and be supportive and listen and not try and interfere too much, because again, that's another reason that sometimes kids don't go to parents. They feel that parents might end up making it worse by getting too involved. So we try and give them the tools that they need to have the conversations and be supportive in a way that'll be the most helpful. And I won't go through these numbers in detail, but we've seen in the 2 years since we launched the campaign over 1 million young people having taken action, and on air we've reached upwards of 30 million viewers with various specials and so forth that we've done. So we'll be continuing the campaign. It's hopefully only the beginning. And that's it.
Uncle John is calling somebody.
I'm not sure whose phone that is. Oh, okay. Thank you for running. Should we answer it? Okay. We can put him on microphone and. I'm going to throw out the first question here because I'm fascinated, and I'd love to ask you, when you show this video or this campaign, the MTV bullying, what are parents' reaction? I mean, I know that parents understand that this is going on, but are they at all shocked at the level to which some of this is going on online?
Yeah, we do often get a lot of shocked reactions. I think parents know what's going on, but sometimes don't understand the prevalence of it. And they always think it's somebody else's kid, not mine. So that, some of those numbers that I showed, like 50% of young people are being impacted by this issue. I mean, there's a 1 in 2 chance it actually is your kid. So we do get some reactions to the prevalence and also the severity of the abuse. So a lot of times people say, oh, it's just bullying, it's a rite of passage, we went through it when we were kids, but with digital technology, a lot of times that bullying can be relentless, 24/7, everywhere they are, and people will say things online that they might not be emboldened to say in person. So the severity of it is a little bit surprising to a lot of parents as well.
And so, George, how does something like SocialShield, do they all go flocking to a product and say, help me, how do I protect my kid?
Well, what we try to do is, since kids are spending so much of their time now on social networks like Facebook, I mean, they're spending more time than they are in the physical world interacting with their friends. we really try to give parents a way of extending their parenting onto the social network world. So there's really two things we do. We give the parents a chance to sort of have a look over the shoulder and see who's your kid talking to, who's trying to friend them, what are they talking about, what kind of pictures are being posted. And so you can just kind of keep an eye on them in the same way you would do in the real world. And then the other thing we do is we look for signs of potentially questionable behavior or postings. So if we see words like suicide or kill or hate or slut, you know, we will flag that, and then we will send an exception report to the parent indicating that we've captured this string of text, and you might want to take a look at it because it could be a sign of something inappropriate or dangerous. It might be innocent, but you need to decide as the parent, and otherwise the parent would have no knowledge that that's even taking place. And so we try to just be an extra set of eyes that watch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and help inform the parent of what's going on in the online world so they can extend largely what is typical parenting onto social networks.
So in the online world, let's say Microsoft, for example, and I'm sorry because Doug, glad you look like your picture. So trash talk, I mean, you know, gaming, that's what they do, trash talk. So where's the line between trash talking and bullying online when you're gaming? And isn't that just taking what kids were doing in the schoolyard and when they were playing face-to-face and just moving it to where kids are playing now?
I think there's a difference in the online world that we see in kids, and that is there's really the ability to not be known or to be anonymous. And a lot of times they're playing games in their basement or in a room that's not being monitored, and the levels of freedom they feel in that online environment lead to some interesting behaviors, especially when it comes to trash talking. So I think there is a line between a sportsman-like trash talk, which you might see, you know, on the playground, versus some of the things that you might hear from a young person on Xbox Live. And that's why we actually have the ability for parents to set the appropriate level of who their kids are talking to and listening to on our service. And we do that by default based off the age of the child. So as an example, if a teenager has an account, by default they'll only be able to talk with their friends. Or a child on the account actually can't accept their own friends' requests. The parent has to approve those for them. So they can have friends, they can talk with their friends, but then they're shielded to some degree from these other, from anybody that feels like they don't necessarily want to be appropriate in an online interaction. So I think it's interesting space because of the anonymity and because it's a place to test out what different language has as an impact on other players and to be able to be somebody else. And that combination can bring out some interesting behaviors, like I said, from kids. But luckily we have some tools to help parents and kids to manage them.
Well, I'm back. I'm sure Andrea's been doing a great job, but I'm going to try to pick up where she left. Clayton, excuse me. Let's talk about, and I know this isn't the primary function of NetNanny, but I have a feeling you got an answer for me. What can kids learn? What can kids learn from NetNanny?
Well, you know, when we've been talking about this a little bit, I think kids can learn that there are things on the internet that could potentially be harmful, and because of that, mom and dad are trying to set up some limits. It's not a controlling type of thing. It's I need to be ready for this before mom and dad grant me access to this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we were watching that MTV video, that's something that went through my mind is typically when we all learn how to drive, mom and dad don't say, here, you're 16, take the keys, go nuts. We go through some training. We drive with mom and dad for a little while. We talk about how we drove. You know, when we take our kids to the playground for the first time, we don't just drop them off and expect them to play well with others. We watch them, and then we talk to them about how they've interacted with others. I think NetNanny helps kids learn that it's a progression to learn how to use the internet appropriately, and mom and dad are putting these things in place to keep me safe, not just control everything that I do.
Okay, now, again, I apologize. I did take a break, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm hoping that I'm asking you any questions here. I don't know what George, what you talked about with SocialShield, but I'm curious about, because you do monitoring, you give parents sort of an intelligence, a look at what their kids, how much information is too much information? Because you can get lost in the weeds. You can get so much information about your kids that you're really not seeing the big picture, you're just kind of seeing a lot of little pictures. And how does SocialShield make sure that they provide parents with what they need to know without inundating them with stuff that kind of they don't need to know?
Well, first of all, if the parent does simply want to scan a summary of everything that's going on, I mean, they can do that, but the real value comes in the algorithms we've developed over the last couple of years, which look for suspicious behavior. Some of it's obvious, like keywords. If we see a word like suicide or kill or hate or slut or something like that, we're going to produce an alert about that string of conversation. But the other thing we do is we look at things like patterns of friending. If we see a lot of inbound communications coming from a stranger and no return communications, that could indicate a harassment. It could indicate somebody trying to act in a predatory manner by friending or sending a friend request to your kid and your kid's not responding. We look at the overlap of the social graphs. If somebody tries to friend your kid and your kid has 200 friends, but the person trying to friend them only has one or maybe no friends in common, that would be a danger sign. So we look for patterns of behavior that could indicate dangerous or inappropriate activity, and then we will alert the parent, and then from that point it's up to the parent to make a decision. Mm-hmm. So it's based a lot on just algorithms and experience and trying to sort through what are things that are potentially dangerous or inappropriate, and what are things that are innocent.
I heard Doug just a moment ago, and this really question could be to anybody, but he talked about trying to distinguish between trash talk and bullying, because there's a certain amount of things that go on that could sound like bullying, but maybe it's not bullying. And a social researcher named Dana Boyd recently came out with an article or a research study where she talked about drama. And she's trying to distinguish, and not just she, a lot of people in this field are trying to distinguish between bullying, which is defined, and I can't exactly recite the terms, but it has to be harassment, it has to be repeated, a power imbalance. There's sort of a definition of bullying, versus the drama of being a teen and the kind of anything from teasing. Now, what some people consider, for example, a racist remark in context could be a term of endearment, and what some people consider bullying in context could just be, kind of hazing among friends. How do both your products and maybe Noopor, you can address this as sort of an educator in a sense. How do we distinguish, and how do we make sure we're not trying to turn our kids into little angels that are just sort of white bread, vanilla, and boring, versus dealing with serious problems?
Well, that's where the parent comes in. You can't tell strictly from the language whether it's innocent or it's threatening. My 14-year-old daughter is on our system, and a while back I got a alert that somebody said, "I'm going to kill you." Well, out of context that sounds dangerous, but yeah. It revolved around the fact that she was thinking of moving to a different school, and it was her best friend saying, "Oh, I can't believe you're going to go to a different school. If you do that, I'm going to kill you." Right. So at some point the parent has to make an interpretation, and no computer can do that, and even if you have humans, you can't do that. So the point is, you need to bring this stuff to the attention of the parents, and the parents ultimately have to make the distinction, because there's a lot of trash talk, and kids use profanity frequently on social networks, and 98% of the time it's innocent. Yeah. But there's the 2% of the time where it's not.
And Noopor, getting back to, because I know you guys, I didn't hear your talk today, unfortunately, but I know you've done a lot of great work on digital abuse. Where do you draw the line between digital abuse and perhaps a legitimate kind of social interaction?
Well, our approach is to let the audience draw their own line, because only they know the context of what they're going through and what they're experiencing, and what might be funny and what might actually be hurtful. So when addressing the abuser, if that's one way to put it, we try to help illuminate the consequences. So you might think that joke is really funny, but let us show you what the impact is on the person on the receiving end, and then you decide, have you crossed that line? And then from the victim's perspective, we try to really give them permission to call it abuse and speak up, because a lot of times they feel like, well, I'm going to be made fun of because I didn't take this joke in a funny way. But no, it isn't funny if you don't think it is. So we're trying to give them permission to say, that's actually abuse, and I have the right to seek help, tell an authority figure. So that's our approach, is really giving them the power to find that line.
See, sometimes I worry that if we exaggerate the bullying situation, that we could actually wind up not being able to focus on the real problem. So I've seen surveys come out, and they'll ask you a series of questions. Has anybody ever been mean to you? Have you ever encountered anything that made you uncomfortable? They ask enough questions that I bet you every single person in this room would raise their hand. Every single person. In fact, if I said, in the last 30 days, have you ever encountered anything online that's made you feel uncomfortable? Raise your hand. I mean, yeah, I'm surprised it's so few, but it's still about half the room. And the point is that those types of mentalities, where I've seen some reports that 60%, 80% of kids are saying they're bullied, I sometimes worry that that actually creates a norm and an expectation that bullying is rampant, whereas most of the serious social research is finding much lower numbers. And I'm wondering how we can, and I'm saying this not to sweep the problem under the rug, but to focus on the problem. How can we deal with the problem? Sometimes when I speak to audiences, I half-jokingly say, if you're here in this room, you don't need to be here in this room. That the very parents who are paying attention to their kids' internet safety are the very parents who probably don't need to be listening to me talk about internet safety. And so I'm wondering, how can we really get to the kids and the families that truly are potentially vulnerable without having to, and pardon the pun, pardon the use of the name of your trademark, but without literally having to be a nanny over every child in America? And anybody here can answer that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think a huge portion of it is visibility from the parents into what's going on. It's a maturity level for kids. You know, if somebody's trash talking to my 7-year-old, he feels like he's being picked on. If I teach him that, hey, that's just his friends teaching him that that's how guys talk to each other at the basketball game, he learns to accept it, and he, you know, mans up a little bit and realizes that we're just having a good time.
Or woman's up, depending on the
yeah,
gender.
whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, because I think a lot of times we either view these things as on or off, and when it's on, it's just free for all. I don't pay attention to what my kids are talking about or how they're interacting. We don't take the time to teach them this is appropriate or this wasn't appropriate interaction, and that's where the visibility, like George has mentioned here, is important, because if we can get that visibility, we can go back to with our kids and say, okay, maybe you're going over the line here making fun of the kid, or maybe these people are just rubbing you wrong just to get a, you know, and we can teach them how to react appropriately instead of, like you say, maybe overreacting and running to the teacher and saying, you know, the sky is falling, I'm bullied online because somebody said that they didn't like my shoes, you know, that type of thing.
Well, I have to say I'm very impressed at what I'm hearing from the industry folks on this panel, because this represents a maturity in your industry, because there was a lot of Chicken Little in the early stages of this field, and I think you guys are really growing up. I don't mean personally, I'm sure you're grown-ups and have been for a while, but as an industry are growing up and are paying attention to the research, and that's, for me, a real enlightenment. I'd like to open it up from the panel. We have time for a couple of questions and to the audience, and I'm happy to take, I see your hand up, sir. Did you have your hand up, or are you just stretching? You're welcome to stretch, too.
Larry, I'm wondering, in your experience, what you view as the most serious issue today, or perhaps in the next 3 years, in terms of safety or privacy that's being presented by technology?
It's a really good question. I probably would say reputation management at this stage of the game, that you know, we worried about sexting. I mean, first of all, we need to distinguish between severity and likelihood. It would be like saying, what do you think is the most serious crime? I'd say rape and murder and all those things. What do you think is the most likely crime? I would say jaywalking. And so you have to put these in context. So in terms of what is most prevalent that's going to affect the vast majority of kids, I would say it would have to be reputation management. In terms of what I think can be devastating to the minority of children who experience it, I would say severe bullying and harassment.
I'd like to actually hear from what the panelists have to say about that question also.
Yeah.
If you guys want to take a crack at it.
So I'll speak for a little product that we launched about a year and a half ago called Connect, which puts cameras into living rooms and potentially bedrooms, you know, around the world, right? So there's definitely the ability for a parent to not have the understanding for what Connect can do, that it can take pictures, take video, allow video chat, and to allow their children to use that without any supervision. And I think that speaks a lot to the reputation of being able to share, and it speaks a little bit to some of the more severe types of online safety issues that we know are out there. So I think as over the next couple of years, parents are going to need to take a close look at the technology they're bringing into their home. I mean, if you go out on the show floor, how many TVs now have cameras in them, right? A lot of those are going to be in kids' bedrooms. A lot of those are going to be showing up, and parents really have to understand what technology is there. And kind of back to the point we've all had, they need to have those conversations with their kids, because that's really where we're going to make an impact. And I don't think it's just the companies represented on this panel or the NGOs that are focusing on this, but it's educators, it's the government. I mean, we need a concerted effort across both the industry and those that care about kids to teach them how to behave and then when to go ask for help, so that we don't have to focus or we don't have to rely on restrictive parental controls, but those are aids in the process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the biggest risk is there is very poor or limited disclosure of exactly what information is being captured and how it's being distributed. A good example is geotagging in photos. Most people have no idea that the default, when you take a photo and upload it, contains the latitude and longitude of where the photo was taken. And so if somebody wants to plot out where your kids hang out and what programs or what playgrounds they go to and what route they take to school or whatever, all that information is embedded in the photos, and most people have no idea. And the defaults on both the social networks and also on most of the apps are generally set to provide excessive collection and distribution of information rather than restrict it. And while you have the ability to shut it down, most people don't know, and the default is usually to distribute that. And so I think it's going to take a few years for people to figure out exactly how much information is being collected and how it's being distributed, because I don't think most people have any idea.
That's a really good point. And of course, in all the location-aware apps on our phones, some of which are designed to share our location with our friends like Glimpse and Looped, knowing how to use those appropriately. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Do we have time for any more questions, or are we really out? We are out. Well, thank you very much for participating. Thank you much to our panelists. See you next year.